Hello, welcome back to Hazel Jane Tarot, and today I'm going to be bringing you my favourites from the month of March 2021. Now, I'm enjoying doing these favourites videos more and more, especially as I've branched a little bit outside of just talking about decks. So I hope you enjoy this video. I'm going to talk about books, some music, some tarot, and some other bits and pieces that I've enjoyed in the month of March. Now, I'm going to start off with music because if you watched my February favourites, you will remember perhaps that I was a little bit obsessed with Hamilton, and I rewatched the filmed version that's on Disney Plus early in the month of March. And that sort of just reinforced how wonderful the musical is, but it shifted my obsession slightly from just listening to the Hamilton soundtrack on repeat to really focusing on Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Aaron Burr in the original cast in the filmed version, and he's on this soundtrack album. So Leslie Odom Jr. is just amazing, and he's such a wonderful performer in that show, and I found out he had released a couple of albums, so I got hold of this one, and I was listening to him a lot on YouTube as well. There's some fantastic videos, and I'll try to link below the video of him singing Without You from Rent, because it is just immaculate from start to finish. But there are videos of him singing duets with his wife on his sofa in lockdown. I mean, there's so much of him on YouTube, and I've been enjoying listening to him singing all sorts of things. But this album of his, the CD is missing because it is in my car. I have listened to this about 10 times since I got it, and the album is kind of a little unexpected, actually. So the first number, which is called Stronger Magic, starts off as a kind of a soft jazz song, and as you start listening to it, you think, okay, I know what this is, and then when you hit the chorus, it sort of brings in these very contemporary sounding electronic beats, and it shifts the feel of the song completely, and then it goes back into the soft jazz sort of for the verses. And on my first listen through the entire album, I found it a bit disorienting overall. There are a lot of different genres of music on this album, and the shifts happen between tracks, but also within tracks. You'll think you're listening to an R&B song, and then it changes into sort of something slightly different. And he plays around with a lot of genres that I'm maybe not as familiar with as well. I don't really listen to jazz for the most part. But after listening to the album a couple of times and sort of getting a feel for the structure of it, and I've started enjoying it more and more and more. Honestly, I would listen to Leslie Odom Jr. sing a menu in a restaurant. I mean, his voice is just so wonderful. But there's some really great songs on this album, and I think my favourites are probably Foggy, which is a really nice, just a kind of love ballad. But there's so many different genres. Go Crazy is kind of a salsa, sort of a Latin song. There's quite a few R&B influenced tracks, but then this Eva song is a spoken word track, which is read by an older woman who is possibly his family. I think the surname was the same. And then he has this entr'acte, which is an orchestral entr'acte like you would have in a musical. And then the Hummingbird's good fun. It's a nice little song dedicated to his daughter. And I think one of the songs I really, really like, actually, that's really grown on me is this Remember Black, which kind of melds together all the genres that he explores in the album in one song. It repeats the same lyrics and the same tune, but the first way through, maybe it's a jazz version, and then there's a salsa version, and there's a musical theater version, and it just explores a lot of different musical genres. So it's not a kind of, this is an album that sort of demands to be listened to. It's not really a background music sort of an album, and I'm really, really enjoying it. And I've seen that he has a Christmas album as well, so when Christmas rolls around, I will definitely be getting hold of it. But yes, Leslie Odom Jr., amazing, amazing, amazing singer. So I've been quite obsessed with him this month. And the other CD that I've been listening to a lot is this one. This band are called Saint Sister. They're an Irish duo. One of the singers in the group, or one of the performers of the two, is from Belfast, and I actually saw her. Her name is Morgan McIntyre, I think. I saw her performing in Belfast years and years ago when she was doing sort of more Americana singer-songwriter guitar-based music. This is more kind of electronic music, but essentially the two girls in the band, one of them is a harpist and the other girl is a harpist. I mean, this is just lyrics, there's no pictures to show you, but let me see if it tells you all the different instruments they play on this album, because it's pretty. So yes, Gemma Doherty is the other girl in the band. So Gemma Doherty does vocals, harp, piano, Wurlitzer, synths, vocoder, keys, shruti box, percussion, singing bowl, and backing vocals. And Morgan McIntyre also does lead vocals, synths, keys, percussion, and backing vocals. You know, and then they've got other band members listed as well. So like, they're really multi-talented performers, and their music, their songs are kind of hard to classify, I would guess. You can hear influences of Enya in there, if you're familiar with that Irish performer she was big in the 90s. I can hear influences of Massive Attack in there sometimes as well, but their music's really quite unique and kind of ethereal, and really, really enjoyable to listen to. And I have an EP of theirs as well. So I saw them perform. I discovered the band when they performed live at a gig in Belfast on International Women's Day. It was quite a few years ago, and this EP was out and available then. And this is fantastic. There's a song on this called Blood Moon, which is just amazing. So I'll try to link it below for you in case you've never heard of this band. And then this album was a follow-up to this. I think they've actually got a second album coming out really, really soon. So I'm a bit late to the party with this, but I heard this playing on the radio, on Radio Ulster, kind of midway through March, and ordered the CD from their website. But you can, you can probably listen to it on Spotify or whatever if you are interested in checking them out. So those are the artists that I've been listening to in March. Leslie Odom Jr. and Saint Sister, really totally different genres of music, but yeah, I've been really enjoying those. So sorry, I've been rambling about music for 7 minutes. Okay, what else? Another few things that I really liked this month. I got a couple of new crystals. There's a shop which is in the city of Derry called The Sacred Tree, and they have been trying to cope with their pandemic closure by doing like a Facebook Live shop where they show stuff out of their shop, and then you can order it over Messenger and like send them the money through PayPal, and then they post it out to you. So I watched they had the live shop for their crystals, and I ended up buying these. So this is black obsidian, and it's just like a little pillar, and obsidian is very grounding and protective stone, and I don't have any, so I thought that would be a nice thing to get. And since I was ordering something, I also ordered this little palm stone, which they said was gold stone. You see the lovely flecks in it. I have no idea if this is an artificial or a natural occurring stone. It looks kind of maybe too good to be true. It's so pretty. But it's not listed in either the Crystal Bible or the Crystal Healer books that I have. So if anybody watching this knows what this stone is, they called it gold stone. Or if you know anything about it, like is it man-made or is it natural, and what sort of properties it might have, I would love to hear a bit more about this. So those were new to me this month. And another thing that I just picked up this month is this candle. I was in a very Catholic little shop, and I had a look through all of their votive candles and so on, and they had this candle with St. Bridget's image on it and a prayer to St. Bridget. So I thought I would pick that up, and I haven't burnt it very much yet, but I thought that was a nice little thing to have as well. So that was also new in March. I'll maybe go to decks next in case you're just here for the tarot. So I didn't get many new decks this month. My restraint has been good, but the one deck that I did get was quite an indulgence. So I have filmed an unboxing of this. This is the Mysteries of Mary Tarot. Now, this deck is one that I haven't used really yet. It came with this gold bag, and I've added that sticker to the bag, which also just was on the packaging when it arrived. This deck is made by Hettienne Grobler. It's available from Her Grace Sacred Art. The artist, the creator, lives in South Africa. And this is the gilded version of the Mysteries of Mary Tarot. Now, the creator is currently working on a Black Madonna Tarot, which is coming out very, very soon. And she mentioned on her Instagram that this deck was being discontinued, which is why I picked it up, because it's one that I had always intended to get eventually. And so I haven't worked with it yet. As you can see, I've shuffled it. I've sort of had a bit of a look at it, but there's quite a substantial guidebook with it that does merit some time and attention. And so I've decided in the month of May, I usually focus on Mary. As I grew up in Catholic Ireland, May was the month of Mary when I was at school, you know, so it's just sort of feels like a natural fit for me to wait and work with this deck properly in May. So that's my one new deck, although I did, I'll be honest, purchase one other deck because I pre-ordered the Spirit Keepers Tarot 3rd edition. Benabel Wen is currently taking pre-orders for what she's calling the Revelation edition of the Spirit Keepers Tarot. And yes, I mean, I have the first and Vitruvian editions, so I had debated whether or not I was going to order the Revelation edition, but, you know, I've been keeping tabs on the creation process. Benabel has been sharing her images and so on social media, and I mean, I just couldn't pass it really, just from a collecting point of view. And then also, I just am very intrigued by decks that have all these different layers of meaning and things to read and learn from, you know. So the Revelation edition of the SKT looks really good. So that will be coming my way sometime later this year. So I did technically purchase 2 decks this month, although my Spirit Keepers Tarot was greatly reduced in price because I'd managed to sell a couple of decks that I wasn't using, and the money was sitting in my PayPal account, and that helped me pay for my Spirit Keepers Tarot. So that was great. Sorry, I'm just dropping cards on the floor because I want to show you my deck modification. If you have been following me on Instagram, you might have seen this. I did a trim job on the Crystal Tarot, and I'm really, really excited by how it turned out. So this deck was a little bit larger. That was the original size of the cards, and you can see it's been trimmed down quite a bit because there was a lot of white border with multiple languages on it, and the image was kind of cut with an extra white border. And the images are lovely and clear, and I don't really think I needed the labels to know which card was which. So it's maybe a little bit hard to see against my very colourful background cloth. But it is quite a pippish deck, or I mean, it is a pip deck. You can see, like, that's the cups, you know, that's some wands. The major arcana and the courts are absolutely gorgeously illustrated. And I am quite keen to learn how to read pip decks, and this one was gifted to me by a very, very good friend, and I do want to, you know, get into reading it properly. And I didn't really like those big white borders, so I think it has become a much more attractive deck. Look at Temperance. It's a much more attractive deck to look at and to handle. Now that it's this little small deck, it's still, you know, it's I'm thinking of edging it in maybe like a dark blue. I think that might work nicely with the color scheme in it, and it's reasonably easy to shuffle, although because they're a little bit smaller, they don't, you know, bend quite as much as when they were bigger. But yes, I'm really pleased with the trim job I've done on the Crystal Tarot, and I'm planning to dedicate at least a month or more to learning how to read pip decks later in the year. The decks that I've actually been working with a lot this month, I did work quite a bit with these 2 decks as a pair. So the Morgan Greer is one I'm sure you're familiar with. It's a classic a classic 70s vibe tarot deck. And then the Threadbound Oracle is really new. It's by Cedar McLeod, and it just came out last year. So they actually go really nicely together. I included them in my Perfect Pairs video VR that I did recently. Oh, some of these are upside down. Although this deck does work with reversals, so I might have reversals shuffled in. I think they worked really nicely together, partly because of the size and the vivid bright colors. So I really enjoyed working with these two together. I think it worked best actually taking a tip from Don Michelle at Boho Tarot, of keeping the oracle card as a sort of central focus, and then, you know, dealing out two tarot cards on either side to sort of support the message. That seemed to work best when I was using these decks together. I will have to do a proper review video on both of these decks, although I feel I do want to work with the Threadbound Oracle a little bit more before I do a review of it. It shuffles so nicely. I hope I can do this justice now. I'm not like the greatest riffle shuffler with most of my decks, and this cardstock is so bendy, and I can like riffle and bridge it really pretty easily, and I just have been very much enjoying playing with it. It's kind of like a linen cardstock, and maybe it's because the deck is slightly smaller than a standard tarot. I can get my hands around it a bit better. But I really liked working with the Threadbound Oracle and the Morgan Greer together. And the other deck that I worked with quite a bit is the Celtic Wisdom, which was one of the out of print Celtic themed tarot decks that I got recently. This one has been sort of sitting out, but I found through the month of March, kind of an extension of what was happening in February, I just was much less interested in doing daily draws, and I used this more. I used all of these decks more just for doing kind of week ahead. I did a dark moon reading, I did a full moon reading, and I did week ahead readings and sort of month ahead readings. And I also just did a little spread looking back at the month and sort of main lessons learned and what to leave behind and what to bring with me into the new month. And I used this deck principally, and then the other two a little bit as well. I love the art in this deck. I'm starting to get to know the stories. The relationship between the card meaning and the story is sometimes a little hard to, it's not terribly obvious sometimes, but the book is really nice. It gives you kind of a traditional card meaning, then it gives you the story that the card is based on, or the image, and then a little bit more of a developed meaning from that. And the art is gorgeous. The art is by Olivia Rayner, and the deck is written by Caitlin Matthews. And yeah, this is a great deck. I mean, look, there's Bridget again. And I really like the narrative quality of it. And I think I will at some point do a proper review of this deck where I explore how I read with it. And that's Danu, the mother goddess of Ireland. And how like the stories that are within the cards, how I've been weaving those into my readings, and how I work with these titles and so on, because it is quite a different system from a traditional tarot, although the meanings are not dissimilar. Okay, so sorry, there was just a wee knock at the door, so I had to pause. So if you're just here for the tarot, that's it for tarot this month. I'm going to share a few books now that I have been enjoying, and then a few other like random things at the end. So I've read actually 4 books this month, and my favorite one, I don't have to show you because I listened to it as an audiobook, and that was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I listened to it because it was recommended by James Feeney over at his channel, and I thought I'd give it a go, and I just loved The Starless Sea, and the audiobook was wonderful. The story has kind of a main narrative of the character who, every chapter that involves him begins Zachary Ezra Rollins on the audiobook. So Zachary Ezra Rollins is sort of the main character that the story follows, and then the alternating chapters in between are like a mixture of the stories from the books that he's reading and that some of the other characters are reading. And the characters that he meets are kind of in the different stories, and he's in some of the stories. And it's just this magical narrative about a world underground that is like a library and a place where stories are created and kept. And as he kind of goes and adventures there, and then there's like a lovely romance subplot. And just, it's wonderful. It's beautifully written. The only disadvantage of it being an audiobook, the audiobook was so well read, and they had different performers for the different sets of stories within the book. So that really helped as I was listening for me to differentiate between the different elements of the story. But the only thing was that the language was so beautiful. I think I would have, if I was reading the physical book, have stopped and reread sections. And when you're listening to an audiobook, it just kind of keeps going, and you don't have that time to pause and reflect in the way that you do sometimes when you're reading a physical book. But 18.5 hours, James, if you're watching, 18.5 hours was how long it took to listen to The Starless Sea, and it was totally worth it. I loved it. And I think I will probably at some point get the physical book and read it again, but I'll maybe leave that for a few years. But yes, it was lovely. I also really enjoyed, not on the same level enjoyed, but my book club, we read this book, The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. When I say my book club, like I don't run it. I've joined a book club. We read our first book in February, and this was the second book. This was good fun. It's kind of like about a group of elderly people in a very nice retirement village in England. So it's kind of upper middle class characters, elderly characters. And then there's a murder, and they're investigating it sort of for their own entertainment. But there's also police characters involved as well that are sort of helping. Well, who's helping who with the investigation is kind of part of the story. The actual plot of like who got murdered and how and why and so on, and all the twists and turns and the false, the red herrings in the plot and so on, that interested me much, much less than just the entertaining way this was written, the characters and the character voices. I did really enjoy. So I think I'm going to pass this along to my mum. I think she will probably enjoy this one. But The Thursday Murder Club was our book club pick for March, and it was fine. It was a good book. There's a couple of other books I'm going to mention now that I'm reading and haven't finished yet. I did get hold of this, which I bought off somebody on eBay. This is one of the books that goes with the Fairy Wicca Tarot. Word of caution, I think I'm going to have to do a full video on this properly once I've read the whole book, and I'll maybe do a review of the deck with it. I haven't used the deck yet. But you may have seen I did do a video on the Fairy Wicca Tarot card names, because they're all in Irish and how to pronounce those. I really, really enjoyed researching that and working on that this month. And this book I thought was going to illuminate the deck a little more. It does a little bit, but it's not really about the deck. This is a course. It shows you, like, it's called Theory and Magic, A Book of Shadow and Light. It's by this Kisma K. Stefanich. And it's really set up as a course book on Fairy Wicca, and Fairy Wicca as being a version of Wicca. Now, I'm enjoying this book, and I think it's a take what resonates and leave the rest kind of situation with this book. The thing that concerns me with the book, though, is that the writer presents this as the definitive old religion of Ireland. She suggests that Fairy Wicca is a religion that was founded by the Tuatha Dé Danann, which, if you're familiar with Irish mythology, are the kind of ancient, the mythological cycle of Irish myth and stories. They're the kind of, your Bridget and your Dagda and Lugh and all these sort of godlike giant characters and the heroes and so on of the beginnings of Irish mythology. They're not the first peoples that are supposed to have settled in Ireland. But anyway, that's a longer story. But she claims that they founded fairy Wicca. But like Wicca is a concept that was invented in the 20th century. So to say that the Tuatha Dé Danann founded fairy Wicca, and that this writer is teaching you the true faith of Ireland that has somehow been transmitted in an unbroken way from the Tuatha Dé Danann until the present day, is just not, that doesn't hold as a claim for me. And a lot of the writers that I have read about Irish mythology and Irish lore, they talk a lot about multiple different versions of certain gods, or different perspectives on different stories, or how, the folk beliefs and practices have interwoven over the years in different regions and so on. Like there's ambiguity to an oral tradition. And this book doesn't really allow for ambiguity. It sort of suggests this is the one version of the truth. And that's the thing that I have the problem with. I have no problem with, an American writer researching and writing a book to teach people about Irish faith, Irish traditional ways, Irish mythology. But it's just the closing down of saying that this is this is the true version, and that this is a faith that you must be initiated into by, say, her. That's the kind of bit that I have a problem with. And there are also things that I would dispute the accuracy of in this book. Like, for example, she suggests that, like, there was a line in it where she talked about the coming of St. Patrick. So like she says, the Cormac died in 627 CE, more than a century and a half before the coming of St. Patrick and the formal entrance of the Protestants. But like, Protestants didn't exist until the 1500s. So there's things in this that I just, she says something about fairies don't require food and they're fed by sunlight. But then a big part of Irish folklore around fairies is, don't eat at a fairy feast, because if you eat the food of the fairies, you could be trapped, and time will pass, and you could come back from the ball that just lasted one night to you, and 50 years have passed. And I would just be cautious, if anybody is going to read this book, that it's not a definitive text on Irish religion or traditional religion or Irish mythology. It's interesting, and I'm going to finish it. I've been enjoying reading it, and I think this religion that Kismet Stepanich has created around Irish mythology is really interesting, but it's just not the one and only take on Irish mythology. The one thing that's wonderful in this book is the illustrations. They are just gorgeous, and they're illustrated by the same person who did the Fairy Wicca Tarot. I mean, that's so great. So it's a good book. It's an interesting book, but I don't think you need it to work with the Fairy Wicca Tarot. And I think at some future point, when I've finished reading the book, I want to do sort of like a more definitive book review and maybe suggest other sources that would either complement or replace this book, in terms of if somebody's interested in learning about Irish lore. Like, I am in no way an expert. I am no way a gatekeeper around Irish mythology. It's just, I noticed things in this book that conflicted with things that I've learned from other sources, and she is sort of saying this is the definitive truth, which I'm not sure it is. One more book that I'm currently reading that I haven't finished yet, but I'm going to talk about now, because I imagine I'll be finishing it really soon, and then when I get to do my April favourites, it'll seem like it's been a really long time ago. This is a great book. It has a really lovely cover. There's like a metallic blue on the cover. So this is called Thin Places, and it's written by Kerri and Dochartaigh, and it's published by Canongate. It is a memoir, but it's not a straightforward memoir. The narrative kind of loops around through different time periods. The writer of this book is a friend of a friend. A girl that I know a little recommended this to me, and but I don't know the writer of this book at all. But she's from the city of Derry, which is near where I grew up. and she's a few years different in age from me. But her experience, this writer's experience of growing up in Northern Ireland, was very, very different to mine. I came from a small town, and while we were impacted by the Troubles, I wasn't impacted by the Troubles in the way that Kerri Dochartaigh was. This is a memoir of trauma and response to trauma, and it's quite heavy in that way. Like, she does talk about really traumatic incidents that happened when she was a child, in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So, like, for example, her house was firebombed petrol bombed by local kids when she was, I think they said it was children, but her house was petrol bombed when she was 11, and they had to flee their house in the middle of the night, and lost all of their possessions, which that alone is a very traumatic event. But there's other things that have happened to her as well. So, she's had a very challenging, time. And the book sort of explores how the impact of that type of experience on a person. But it also explores the healing process as well, and the connection with place, and the push and pull of leaving the homeland and then coming back, and so on. And I just wanted to read you a little excerpt from it because it's really powerful, and it's hard to get a sense of the the way the prose is without actually seeing it. So here we go. I think of the loss of our identity, our language, and our traditions and culture, the things that we are told make us who we are. I cannot help but see it all tied up together with the same rope. How can we protect ourselves from things that we cannot talk about? How can we protect ourselves? How can we protect things that we cannot name? I have returned to the site of my trauma, and I am allowing the land to hold me in its strong, silent hands. I have found the words for butterflies in my native tongue, and I am drawing their lines on my insides. I am ready now to speak of unnameable things. I know that so many of us are. To stand together under an ever-changing sky and to speak of things like healing and learning and saving of things that can still be saved. To stand together under a sky that, no matter how grey and uncertain, still holds room for butterflies, moths, dragonflies, and things we once were too fearful to name, things like whispered hope. The Irish word for hope is dochas, or doig, and holds deep within its ancient roots glimmers of the Irish word for giving, for belonging, for beauty, doichul. Yes, we are ready now to speak of hope. We have the words for it, and that changes things. In fact, that changes everything. So as you can see, the prose is really beautiful, and she interweaves Irish words for things, which I very probably mispronounced there. So I didn't check the correct pronunciation of those before reading that to you. So apologies to any Irish speakers whose ears hurt from the way I said those. But it explores a lot about the kind of environment, and species going extinct. She talks a lot about the thin places as kind of like the places in landscape that feel, more connected to the otherworldly. But it's all about kind of the liminal spaces, like the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, the edges of the sea, but those kind of thin places like this spiritual sites and different places also in England and Scotland and so on that she'd visited, and about within the self, and so it's exploring sort of psychological, environmental, political as well. It was written in 2019, and there's a lot of kind of Brexit anxiety and fears about how that was going to impact Northern Ireland sort of seeping into this book as well. And yeah, I mean, as I say, I haven't finished it, but it's very powerful, and I will be finishing it shortly, so I'm counting it in my March favourites. And if you're interested in kind of getting a bit of insight into the Northern Ireland and the Troubles and so on, but in a kind of lyrical, poetic way, this book is really interesting. And it's also a bit about exploring the Irish language, and yeah, there's just lots of layers to it. And yes, I recommend you check it out. All right, just a few more things I want to talk about on the subject of learning Irish. I have really been enjoying my continued study of Irish, and this month we stepped it up a notch. I'm studying with a friend, and we're doing a course online that's based sort of around conversational Irish, but we got ourselves a couple of textbooks so that we could get give yourselves a bit of extra homework, and read a little bit about the grammar, and do some extra questions and extend our vocabulary beyond what we were getting in the class. So these are the two that I've got, and they're both pretty accessible. I think they would both be difficult to use without a teacher, but this one comes with a CD. Ta-da! And this one comes with downloadable audio files, which I've downloaded onto my phone. And so when I'm learning like vocabulary for items of food, which is the unit that I'm studying at the minute, I can listen to it and try to get the correct pronunciation. So really, really, really enjoying studying Irish at the moment, and hopefully will continue for many, many, many months and probably years to come. It's going to take me a long time to get through these books, that's for sure. And then one last thing, I did mention that I've been enjoyed my book club. I've also last year I did a course with Tom Benjamin online, which he called Tarot Jam, and a couple of the people from that course we've continued to meet once a month online, and we met again there at the end of March, and it was great. The three that I met with this month, they're all in the US, and yeah, it's just fantastic to have tarot friends to chat with, and really get to know, even though they're halfway around the world. So that Tarot Jam chat was a big favourite. And finally, I'll not talk too much about this yet, but I have finally been making a bit of progress in terms of improving my diet and habits around taking care of myself physically. And one of the things I've really enjoyed is this cookbook. The Pinch of Nom. It's a British published cookbook. It says they're slimming recipes, but they're just really, really nice and pretty easy to make. And as you can see, mine is bookmarked with all the sort of my favorite recipes. And I've just been really, really enjoying cooking a lot more since I've been using this book. And I also finally got a child seat for the back of my bicycle, and I have got a helmet for myself and for my little girl who's nearly 3, and we've been going for spins on my bicycle, and that has been just fantastic fun. That has been one of my favourite things actually in March, and I'm so glad the weather is starting to improve because I'm looking forward to getting out on the bicycle much more frequently. So if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. It is the 1st of April as I'm finishing this, and it's April Fool's Day, and I learned today that the word for a fool in Irish is an amadan. So there you go. If you've watched all the way to the end, you've learned a word in Irish, an amadan. Amadan is a fool. So look, I really appreciate you watching. Any comments below if you like any of these things, or hate any of the things I've shared, or if anything you've seen intrigues you, or you want to chat a little bit more about underneath, I would love to have a chat with you about it. So yes, have a lovely month of April, and I'll see you back here again soon.